Well, as I'm recording this, this is November 11th, 2023. But November 11th, 1918 is the day that the armistice was set to take force. On the 11th day of the 11th month at the 11th hour. Though looking at Wikipedia, they said that there was still shelling going on until sunset. And I do know that there was, well, other things going on, including a Russian Revolution / Civil War. Well, very good, Nick. And hello, Arno. Good to have you here. So I'm starting this stream. We will be. I'm sort of looking at the Wikipedia pages because it's convenient here while you're looking at the center of Germany. The armistice, it ends the fighting of the First World War. That is the important thing to remember on this date. You have to always be careful with governments and propaganda. I'm not sure when they start talking about and using the war to end wars, World War One. I don't know that anybody believed that. Really believed that there was going to be no more wars. Well, and so, but did these people die in vain on all sides of the war? No, they didn't. It's really important that we remember that this is Veterans Day. And I particularly in America, and I don't mean to slight all those who served in the military, because yes, the Cold War and other times you do serve in the military, and that's true. But this to me is really the veterans who have served in combat. Um, that is a particular thing. And combat can happen on many places, many fronts. It doesn't have to happen in a world war or in Vietnam or in Afghanistan. Combat can happen, in your home country, if you're in a first world place like Britain or the United States, so it's combat veterans particularly. Not that you ever had to shoot at anybody or even be directly shot at, just to be in a, an area in which actual combat is being taken place, because that is a certain stress level, shall we say, that you have gone through. And maybe just operated a radio on board of a ship, or maintained the engines on board of a ship that is being fired at or something. It's not that you have to be shooting down the enemy aircraft with your anti-aircraft gun on a ship or whatever. And yes, I don't want to slight the service that all the members of the armed forces give, but it's particular thanks to those who served in a combat zone. I want to thank, including the current ones serving. So that I want to say. But to get back to the armistice gets the fighting stopped. And talked to a few people at different times. Was World War I inevitable? I don't know that it was. I don't think that it was. I think there was going to be some big wars in Europe, but it really becomes a world war. I mean, it was originally called a Great War or the Great War. Because on the scale of nations, nothing had been seen at this level since the Napoleonic Wars. You know, so many nations involved in it. Because there had been previous global wars than World War One, but global war and world war are two different things. I think the 7 Years' War is about the first global war in which there's fighting on all continents. But countries like Japan and China were not involved in that war or the Napoleonic Wars, where India was involved, Africa was involved, South America was involved, but it didn't. And America, United States was involved in, well, both the 7 Years' War and we called it the French and Indian War here, fighting. We were still a colony, and then later as an independent country. The War of 1812, of course, happens within the context of, and hello, Arno over on Rumble, uh, within the context of the Napoleonic Wars. Britain would not have been taking the sailors from U.S. ships to into its navy if it wasn't needing to fight Napoleon. So that's the cause of that war is, although the U.S. never allies with Napoleon's empire, they're just another war that's happening as part of it. But the first really global, or first real, world war was World War One. Sure, there's nations like Switzerland, like Sweden, that don't get into either of those conflicts, and there are South American nations or whatever that don't get into the war. But much of Latin America, South America, if you want to call, does get into the World War II, not so much World War One. But Brazil gets in World War II, sends combat units into Italy, about a battalion size. But and Mexico's in the war, Chile's in the war. I don't remember all the others, in Latin America that get into World War II. And of course, much of the globe in both World War One and Two are colonial possessions of somebody, including Japan having colonial possessions. Not always there. Hello, Jetin. Yes. Happy Chile Memorial Veterans Day. Yes. So it's a world war. Like I was saying, I would contend that it wasn't inevitable that it happened the way it did. What it does do, though, it devastates Europe. The First World War. Not as bad as the Second World War, but it does devastate Europe. And it shows the institutions of Europe that existed at the start and had a large grip on society at the start of World War One are incapable of working in the modern world, of meeting the modern world's needs, shall we say. And this, I'm looking at government institutions, religious institutions, not just the Catholic Church, but a lot of the churches, the way that they dealt with people and having this war happen, it just shows they don't have good explanations for what's going on. the governments cannot realize that one more push, one more whatever will get us victory if we just try a little bit harder. I think by 1916, it should be apparent to the major players that it was time to negotiate. You know, Germany's military objectives, what are they? Huh? I know that there are, um, even prior to the war and during the war, ultra nationalists wanting a greater, super, bigger German empire or whatever. Yeah, but what's German stated war entry? Oh, their ally of Austria, who had their basically heir apparent, equivalent to, shall we say, in a modern idea of an America, the vice president assassinated by an agent for Serbia, or a Serbian-supported agent, and Austria-Hungary is going in to beat up on Serbia. And they had already been expansionistic into the region, no doubt, but um, and Russia comes into the war. And yes, Germany knows that Russia and France have an allied alliance situation, that they believe that France is going to come into the war if Germany goes into the war with France. So they attack France first off. Okay. Now, Germany may be thinking like, oh, hey, because realize like this whole area was German at the time. Oh, hey, we might be able to grab up some more territory. I mean, not that there wasn't territory, or, whether it's in Belgium or in France or wherever, not that there wasn't territorial, also on France's side, territorial ambitions. There were. But Germany's big goal is to, support Austria from being crushed by Russia. Well, they achieved that by 1916. Now, I'm not saying Austria achieved its goal of crushing Serbia by 1916, and I don't really have a good grasp on the history of the Austrian, right off the top of my head, of the Austrian push into Serbia at that point. But they had. And so I think it's time to go, hey, yeah, we, not that we fucked up, but we did our job. This is what I say, and I know there's a lot of talk, including some commentators. Hello, Cyrillic guy. I don't read Cyrillic, but hi. Can't pronounce your name. With Ukraine. I know some commentators saying, oh, Ukraine's lost. Look at they lose on the war. To my opinion, Ukraine already won the war. Not it's 100% victory. What was Russia's goals, Putin's goals? I'm not sure in detail, but we can definitely tell from their military actions. Yes, they wanted to expand control in the Donbass and get a land bridge to Crimea. That they have done. But they also had a major front and thrust down towards Kiev, which has completely failed, as well as my understanding is special operation forces appeared in Kiev. I don't know exactly how they got there. Very well could have, infiltrated prior to the war, or parachuted in, or just literally got in a truck and drove in after the war started with the chaos. Maybe all those things are happening. But there was definitely an idea, if not to totally get back Kiev formally inside the Russian Federation, or inside the Commonwealth of Independent States, I should say. What did Turnlow say? Only it doesn't happen if either France or UK are involved. Not get involved. Yeah. There is a long delay at the start of the war between the assassination and the actual Austrian military operations. I do believe had the Austrian military operations, because Austria tries to negotiate with Serbia for quite some time, but had Austria immediately mobilized and went down there, I think to a lot of the Western powers, it would have looked like a natural reaction to it. But I think the separation of time separates the assassination in a lot of people's and government's mind from the reason Austria is being aggressive against Serbia. So yeah, um, I don't know, whether Putin's goal was to bring Ukraine back into the Commonwealth of Independent States, or simply to install a pro-Russian government in Kiev. Um, because we all know Belarus and some of these other states in the Commonwealth of Independent States, um, they're not independent states. They're part of neo-Russian Empire. Georgia, the parts that are not controlled. Yeah, there's two breakaway areas controlled by the Russians, basically. Parts not controlled by Russia. Yeah, that's an independent country, and we can talk about Armenia and whatnot. But um, a lot of these other places, they're part of the Commonwealth of Independent States. They may have their own chief executive, but they are a more than just a simple puppet state. Playing now Hoy for World War II with modern bomber borders. With modern borders. Okay. Interesting. Interesting idea. So by 1916, it should have been apparent that Paris isn't going to fall in the next big offensive, or Germany isn't going to be pushed back out of Belgium in 1916, by a French offensive. That all these parties on both sides should have uh, you know called for negotiations, called for, at least particularly in the western borders, go back to end the war with borders, antebellum, borders before the war. I don't know about down here in Serbia or in the east here, but probably, and do that. And the churches, prior to World War I in Europe, I would say religion had a very strong hold. After World War I, it has a weak hold. There are a lot of people in this modern world. I know a few of them, but there's a lot of people, and they go, well, I'm not religious, they'll say. I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. And it's not just, the healing powers of crystals or something, which, if it's just literally the freaking crystal, that could theoretically be, scientific. It's not some sort of mystical power. It's just, I don't know. Like we do know that there are, magnets. They have a power field around them. It's a well scientific documented thing. Now I don't know that it's, you know, makes you stronger or weaker or something, have a magnet on you, or does anything to you, but we do know that magnets have a magnetic field. Maybe there is a crystal field. We just don't know how to measure it. We don't have a device to measure it. Maybe there is, but I'm not saying I believe there is. But you could maybe believe in that without believing in spiritual. But a lot of these are spiritual. Well, what they're saying is not, when they say they're not religious, they just don't believe in any of the major established religions. The major established religions do not satisfy their. I know this is a big watching topic right now. Not very many people here, but I think it's important to remember this and talk about this. That the the religious institutions do not answer a lot of people's needs. However you want to look at that, as whether as a social institution or a belief system institution. And so the armistice does finally come about, not when it is deemed that the war is unwinnable by the Germans, but that they're actually losing the war in the sense, like I say, Germany had in essence already won, because they blunted Russian attacks against Austria-Hungary. Austria-Hungary wasn't being, overrun by a huge Russian army. So they won. And they also defeated any great French threat to marching into, the Rhineland or whatever. Now, I know they, I'm sure in their picture of their mind, the last war with France, hey, they, besieged Paris and eventually marched into Paris. In the Franco-Prussian War, and they wanted to repeat that, but they had already, in essence, made the major military goal of blocking the Russians. So now I'm not going to go into here today, but this sets up the Versailles Treaty, or treaties, because I know there's other treaties going on. The U.S. I don't know if the U.S. signs Versailles or is it just the Saint-Germain Treaty that the U.S. signs with Germany or something. There's a bunch of other treaties going on in and around the Versailles, but that comes later. This is just this main cessation of combat, but and so and of course this sets up this war that we're getting ready to get near to is of course World War II. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of talk about and commemorate 11/11/11. Hello, the Smeggy Bean 6000 WSG. I'm sorry, I don't get WSG. Woodrow Wilson signed the Versailles Agreement. Okay, he did. Okay, he did sign that as well. Maybe Germain is dealing with somebody else. Okay, but Wilson did. Very good. Yeah, Woodrow Wilson, he is the idealist of the victors that causes lots and lots of problems. I totally agree with the assessment that means what's good. Okay, what's good? What is good? Okay, what's good? Well, we're talking about the end of World War I. That World War II is a war over the Treaty of Versailles. Over the settlement of World War I. So World War I and World War II are very direct related events. They're very much one's a follow-on of the other. Yeah, it's really very much a part one and part two event. So yes, and this sets up the modern world.